Shadowverse Evolve is looking to have one of the most cutthroat competitive circuits in any TCG. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, it's Espira, and we're back with another Shadowverse Evolve video. This time we are breaking down the organized play structure for Shadowverse Evolve, kind of looking at what the world will look like in terms of playing for locals, kind of the store championship scene, and then what you'll have to do to be able to get to the world championship. And there's a lot there. At first, we're going to look at the structure of what your local scene is looking like so that you can get an idea of what play throughout the year will be. But then we're going to look at the World Championship, which looks cool, but does have some concerns on my part. To kick it off, we have the shop tournaments, and these are just going to be your weekly locals. Thankfully, Shadowverse does have a promo system in place for when you play at your locals, which is awesome. So when you play at your locals, you will get a pack that has any one of these cards, and naturally, depending on how your store structures them out, you might get additional packs and so forth. Always talk to your store to see how they structure things out. You can get yourself either a Lilith, Dragon Warrior, Priest of the Cuddle, Alchemist Workshop, Elven Princess Mage, or Floral Fencer, which is a lot of fun. Gives you a lot of different chases to be able to go and get. I do find it amusing that all of them are evolved spirits, except for Ruin, but that's kind of a given based on how Ruin plays. You're probably going to want a spell anyways. The foiling for these are like shatter foily, so very similar to kind of what you would expect from a premier foil you would get from the main set, although here it is through promo cards. So nothing crazy here. You play your locals, you get these, and then these will rotate throughout the season. I have to assume they'll be tied to booster releases. So with the release of set 2 is when we'll get the next wave of promos for your locals. The step up above that is actually the Shadowverse Evolve Championship. Now, I don't love the word championship because it makes talking about organized play kind of confusing, but basically this is your shop tournaments, your game days if you come from Magic, your store championships if you come from like Bandai games. This is basically what this is. And generally the format for these are going to be best of 1. So all of this is best of 1. Locals might be best of 3. I know that many locals have run in best of 3 format, although the competitive format for Shadowverse Evolve, at least right now, is best of 1 with a 25-minute Swiss rounds and 30-minute top cut. So that's what you're going to be looking like in terms of structure. And as far as store championships goes, there are 2 ways in which these can actually run. No matter what style of store championship is run, you will always at least get this pricing where you get a quick later as the participation prize. In top 8, you get the shop shifting mage, and then in champion slot, you get path to purgatory. So they definitely lean on those neutrals being the want to chase promos. There's no doubt about that. But again, like I was saying, there are 2 structures, which is kind of weird. This is definitely the most odd part about the whole structure. I think the World Championships has a few more glaring issues in regards to the way that's structured. This is just kind of weird. So you can either have your store do a showdown, which is like a standalone tournament where you're going to be able to play out for the promos that you saw before, or alternatively, your store can collaborate with other stores to create kind of a local circuit. So it's almost like a pseudo premier play where at least 4 other stores in your region create a shop qualifier circuit where the top X player ends up being able to qualify for the grand finals. And then out of those 4 plus shop qualifiers, then you have the actual grand final. The whole structure is a little bit odd though, because it requires such a deep level of coordination between stores. And it's like which store actually gets to host the grand final. And it's this weird like kumbaya, hey, all the stores are going to play really nice together, which in a preferred world, I do think we do want players to be able to play in multiple locals throughout the week. And I think cohesion and synergy between stores lends itself to the scene being stronger, which means all stores do well, as opposed to them kind of cannibalizing each other. So in that sense, I do think the big goal of the championship series is to have stores collaborate, is to kind of create this synergistic local scene so that players have multiple locals to play to, and to really push stores to want to push a local scene. I think the big focus on this is where they want people to play this year. They really want people to play at their stores, which I think is a great idea because games live and die by their local game stores. As much as I'm an organized play nut, and I'm definitely more peeled towards the competitive side, I think a game that doesn't have locals does not have legs in the long run. Regardless, so that doesn't necessarily change the concerns I have about the World Championship. So up until now, that's basically the local scene. You have your weekly locals, and then you have your monthly locals. So these championships will be happening monthly, and again, you can either have the showdowns where it's the one-ofs, or a circuit if you end up living in a Bushy Road hub that's able to actually support 4 different stores or more, being able to kind of work together towards having this kind of circuit. Beyond that, though, is Premier Organized Play, and that's kind of where my world lives in. The World Invitational for this year is to a point where someone like me, who is more leaning towards the competitive side of the game, will have many months of not having much to do. So we're going to break that down. The World Invitational is broken down into three parts. You have the shop qualifiers, which are happening in August. Then the shop qualifiers are what allow you to be able to play in regionals. The regional qualifiers will be happening between September and December. And then there's the World Finals happening in February. And this is in Japan, which is pretty exciting, especially given that some of the prizing will lend to being sponsored as far as your flight to Japan. As far as the shop qualifiers are concerned, the promo will be this angelic snipe, which is absolutely gorgeous. For participating, you get one. For being the winner, you get an additional one. I think that works. So obviously, while it's nice, the pricing isn't really what's there. It's the invite that allows you to be able to compete even further in the organized play program. As far as how many invites are given out, it's not that much, but I mean, I think the idea of keeping it premier is kind of the idea there. So if you're less than 8 players, there are no invites given. If you are 9 to 16 players, the first placer will get it. Between 17 to 32, 2 players will get it, and 33 to 64, 3 players will get them. So not a ton of invites, especially given that regionals aren't open. So reminder, you will have to actually get your invite through the shop qualifiers to play in regionals. So I foresee a decent amount of players actually traveling 2, 3, maybe even 4 hours away just to a shop that has those kinds of numbers so that maybe they can score an invite. So it's just to be able to play at a more competitive level than a locals, because these are basically locals plus you need to actually qualify, which is incredibly cutthroat. And then beyond that, we have the regional qualifier. So the regional qualifiers are happening between September and December. And for that promo, it is Demonic Strike. So not as flexible as Angelic Snipe, but I think that's for the better. I think Angelic Snipe is the more generic staple that goes on for many more sets than Demonic Strike. So the fact that that one sticks around as the one that more people will have access to through shop qualifiers, I'm all about. And regardless, I think a neutral spell that a lot of decks are able to get some usage out of is fine as well. However, there are a couple of details about these regional qualifiers that make it so much worse of a pill to swallow, in my opinion. The top 3 players of each regional will qualify for the finals, with the champion also having their trip sponsored. That's great. The champion has their flight sponsored, but the top 3 players is not a ton of invites, especially when you consider that each player who qualifies through a shop qualifier can participate in up to 1 regional qualifier. And this is where my biggest hangup is the fact that you are so limited in the ways that you can interact with the competitive season, especially with the way that the months are broken down. Someone like me who really only interacts in a big way with card games via competitive play, this is really tough because it really limits how much I get to interact with the Shadow Revolve scene in the ways that I like to do so. If we even just look at a calendar here to kind of give ourselves an idea, we have August, which is a shop qualifier, and then September through December, we have the regionals. In January, nothing's happening. That's fine. January is kind of usually like a standby month in the TCG realm, as a lot of places starting to get configured, especially in Japan when they take a lot of time off. And then in February, we have the World Finals, and maybe in March is when the new season starts. Who knows? But realistically, that's not actually the way it plays out. The way it plays out is you get a couple of shop qualifiers, maybe until you get your invite, and then you have a single regional qualifier within any of these months. So, for example, let's say I qualify in August and I go to a regional in September. That means that I do not have a way to competitively play the game in terms of premier play. That's not like a shop championship type of thing between the months of October to January. So that's 4 months I don't get to interact with the most competitive level of play in the game because I'm not allowed to participate in those tournaments. And that's assuming I even get my invite to Worlds. If I don't even get my invite to Worlds, that is 5 months I don't actually get to play until the start of the new season. And again, that's even in itself assuming that I even qualify for a regional, based on hopefully having shop qualifiers around me. And then even if I do, maybe not even getting the top there. And that's where I kind of lends myself to having a little bit of trouble really like swallowing how this is going to play out. Players like myself and any player, to be honest, will be able to interact with Premier Play for 2 out of 7 months. If they don't have a Worlds invite, if they do, obviously that becomes 3. But at the end of the day, the majority of the time within that 7-month window, you will not be able to interact with Premier Play, which feels really iffy to me, especially when you consider that the majority of the players' competitive season will be decided by roughly 20 best of 1 games. You have the shop qualifiers, then after the shop qualifiers, you have the regional, and those are all best of 1. So not only are you not getting a lot of tournaments to play in the tournaments themselves, because they're 25-minute best of 1s, you're actually not getting all that much playtime either. So at the end of the day, if I don't qualify, I played 20 games of premier competitive Shadowverse and then my season's done until March of next year. That's a tough pill to swallow, especially for a player like me. I understand for most players, a lot only ever really participate in 1 to 2 premier events a year, and that part I get. But I think there's such a level of the like 10% ambassador level players, the pro level players that are able to break down what a meta is going to look like and really grind out the fact that the the grinder mentality isn't really something that I can apply to this game is a little bit rough. And it comes off extremely cutthroat as a game that kind of feels that it wasn't going to lean that way at first. Now, there is the fact that shop championships are happening every single month. So at the least, there's that level of competitive play that if I have a hub around me, I can go to. But that's the thing, right? I need the hub around me. Whereas at least organized play means that if I don't live in a region where there's a ton of local play, I can still travel and still get high level competitive play. And unfortunately, that's robbed from me. So thankfully, I do live in a region where I think I'll be able to jump into some shop qualifiers and some shop championships throughout the months. But nevertheless, this is really rough and almost creates a kind of metagame where if I do get my qualifications to play in a regional, I should probably spike the regional that I think will have the least amount of players so that I have the best chance of actually making it into the top 3. And that's not really a way that I like to think about how I should jump into competitive play. So either way, while I think it's super exciting, I think the trip to Japan is super exciting. I think fighting off our World's Invite lends itself to some incredible stories. This calendar spooks me a little because it basically says my run can live or die in 2 tournaments for a total of 20-ish games, and then I'm just kind of looking on from the sidelines for the next 5 months, which is a little bit of a tough pill to swallow, not gonna lie. But with that said, I think the biggest takeaway is the fact that side games are really kind of doubling down on the notion that they want people to play at locals. You have your weekly promos, and then you have your monthly store championships that they are really pushing, because I'm not gonna lie, this circuit thing that they're having at the local level is something I've never seen done before, and I would argue probably really hard to do. I think it's hard to get stores to kind of coordinate at the level you do, but the ones that can make that happen will probably lend themselves to doubling down on an extremely strong Shadowverse Evolve hub, which could be very exciting for those players and does at least lend itself to some way to try to get some more premier play vibes in the player base when they can't necessarily participate with the World Championship. Either way, I'm 100% going to try. I definitely want to end up in Japan in February, so I'll give it my best go, and I hope you guys do as well. But for Season 2, I would hope that if side games do see this video, I would really appreciate them maybe readjusting, giving us opens like they do in Japan. I think opening up competitive play, and I understand it's the first year in, so adjustment period and all that, but I do think opening up competitive play so that it's something that we can interact with throughout the year will lend itself to at least players like myself finding being able to deep dive more into it. With that said, let me know what you guys think of organized play down in the comments below. With that said, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Ciao.